We welcome you back to this channel. In this video, we explore survivors of haunted house challenges. Stories of those who dared to accept a challenge and faced unimaginable things. Go ahead, turn off the lights, and let's take one more step into the world of the unknown.
Laughter in the dark.
I had heard about that abandoned house since I was a child. Everyone in town talked about a presence that haunted anyone brave enough to cross its threshold. They said it was inhabited by a small creature that wouldn't leave anyone alone once they entered. One of those boring nights, my friends and I decided to dare each other to spend the night there and leave at dawn. We thought it would be a good idea to prove that none of the stories were true. I was the first one to go. We arrived at the house's entrance, and I could see that the place was in ruins, with graffiti-covered walls and vegetation climbing up the exterior, clinging tightly to the house. I stood in front of the door, gently pushed it, and it creaked open. I could see the interior. Everything was deteriorated. I closed the door behind me, determined to complete the challenge. At first, all I could hear were the creaks of old wood and the echo of my own footsteps. To stay calm, I kept telling myself there was nothing to worry about, that the stories about the creature were just myths. I don't remember exactly how much time passed, but it felt like hours, and everything was still calm. Yet the loneliness of the place scared me, and I constantly felt like I was being watched. Suddenly, I started noticing small movements, some kind of shadows moving in the corners, as if something was quickly darting away to avoid being seen. I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, until I heard a faint scratching on the wall behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing, just the flickering light of my flashlight on the torn wallpaper. As the night went on, the noises grew louder. It sounded like something was dragging objects on the ground floor, and the rhythmic thumping on the ceiling seemed to follow me each time I moved to another room. I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm, but then I heard a whisper. It was faint and high-pitched, like a child muttering incomprehensible words. It seemed to come from everywhere. I couldn't pinpoint its exact origin. At that moment, I saw something small and hunched peeking out from the hallway. It was a figure the size of a child, but grotesquely deformed. Its skin was grayish, clinging to the bones, and its eyes, sunken into darkness, reflected a kind of childish malice. The creature moved nimbly, hiding behind doors and broken furniture each time I tried to look at it directly. I tried to move away, but every time I did, I felt like it was getting closer, as if it were playing hide-and-seek with me. The whispers turned into muffled laughter, and I could hear its small hands scratching the walls as it followed me. I ran up the stairs, thinking that I could get away from that thing. I walked down the hallway and took refuge in one of the rooms on the second floor, trying to stay quiet. Within seconds, I could hear the creature on the other side of the door, its heavy breathing and quick, erratic footsteps. Then I saw the door slowly begin to open. The creature stood in the doorway, staring at me with those dark, empty eyes. In a sudden movement, it rushed towards me, and I felt its cold, bony fingers trying to grab my legs. My phone fell, and as I tried to push it away, I felt the creature's small claws scratching me violently. A sharp sting and burning pain coursed through my body. I ran as fast as I could without looking back. I bolted down the stairs, stumbling several times, hearing those quick steps right behind me. It seemed to be enjoying the game, like a child who doesn't want to stop playing. When I reached the main door, I pushed it with all my strength and burst outside. The creature's laughter echoed in my ears as I crossed the garden, as if it delighted in the terror it had caused me. Since that night, I haven't been able to get the image of that figure out of my head. The scratches on my legs healed, but every time I close my eyes, I feel those little fingers trying to grab me again. I never told my friends what really happened in that house, and seeing the state I was in when I came out, none of them dared to take the challenge after me. The creature is probably still there. And sometimes in the silence of the night, I swear I can hear its whispering laughter. Although I've returned to my normal life, something tells me I'm not completely alone, and that small being is still waiting for someone willing to be part of its next game.
The Forbidden Game.
I was a teenager when it all happened. That age when you think you're invincible and do irrational things just to fit in. My friend Christy and I were inseparable, always looking for the next adventure, and our classmates knew it. So when a group of boys from school dared us to play Ouija in the abandoned house at the edge of town, we didn't hesitate to accept. The house was an old mansion, one of those that seems like it's about to crumble but still stands, defying time. It was said to have belonged to a family that disappeared without a trace, and that the place was cursed. Some people claim to hear wails when passing by the house, or see shadows moving through the windows at dusk. It was a story told in town that not everyone took seriously, but something about that house had always given me a bad feeling. We arrived right at midnight, with a candle, the Ouija board, and a promise that we wouldn't last 10 minutes before running out. We went into what seemed to be the main room, with the ceiling half collapsed and the walls covered in dampness and mold. We placed the Ouija board on the floor and lit the candle. Christy started joking that nothing would happen, that ghosts didn't exist. But ever since we entered, I felt a weight in the air, as if someone were watching us from the shadows. We placed our fingers on the pointer, and Christy, in a mocking tone, asked if anyone was there with us. The pointer didn't move at first, and for a moment I relaxed, thinking it was all just nonsense. But then the candle flickered and the pointer slowly started to move toward yes. We looked at each other, convinced the other was moving it. But by then, neither of us was smiling. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly and I began to smell something rotten, like decaying meat. Christy asked who it was, and the pointer moved sharply across the board, spelling out, "Not your place." A loud noise, like something heavy falling, echoed from the floor above. We froze, our eyes fixed on the staircase leading to the second floor. Suddenly, we heard slow, heavy footsteps, as if someone were dragging their feet. The pointer began to move frantically across the board, nonsensically, and the candle went out. Only the faint moonlight came through the broken windows, casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. And then we saw her. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. It was a woman, but her face was covered by a dirty, tattered veil. She didn't move, just stared at us, but I felt her gaze pierce through me. Her dress was torn and stained, and her hands were very thin and pale, sticking out from the folds of the fabric. I tried to whisper something to Christy, but my voice caught in my throat. The woman started descending, each step accompanied by the sound of bones crunching in a chilling echo. The walls began to shake, and the Ouija board moved on its own without anyone touching it. I felt an icy wind pushing me toward the door, and we ran without looking back. We ran to the car, but the vehicle's lights flickered as if they were about to go out. Christy was desperately trying to start it, but the engine wouldn't respond, and in the rearview mirror, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The woman's figure was there right behind us, closer than any person could have gotten by running. She slammed against the window with a force that didn't seem possible, leaving dark marks like deformed skeletal handprints. Christy screamed, and finally the car started. She hit the gas and we sped out of there, but I kept seeing her figure at every turn, in every dark corner, as if she was following us, even though I couldn't physically see her. Something about her presence stuck with me. I knew at that moment that whatever was in that house wouldn't stay there. That night, I didn't sleep. And even though Christy and I promised not to talk about what we saw, the feeling that something was following me was still there. It didn't matter where I was. I always felt that same gaze watching me from some dark corner. Years have passed since that night, but even now, sometimes when I turn off the lights, I see a shadow cross the room. And I know that, in some way, that figure stayed with me from that night.
The Forgotten Child.
When I was 16, my group of friends and I spent our time challenging each other to do reckless things. That night, the dare was to enter the ruined house at the end of the street, the same one everyone in the neighborhood talked about. It was said that many years ago, a father had locked his son in his bedroom as punishment, and when he finally went to get him, he found him dead. Since then, the spirit of the 8-year-old boy had lived in the house, looking for someone to set him free. My friends and I laughed at the story. None of us believed the town gossip. But when we arrived in front of the house, we all fell silent. Something about its darkness made us nervous. The others stayed outside, but my best friend Charlie and I decided to go in. I told him it was just stories to scare kids, trying to convince myself more than anyone else. Charlie and I looked at each other and began walking toward the front door. As we crossed the threshold, a chill surrounded us. The house was in ruins, with the ceiling about to collapse and dust covering everything. Old furniture, broken windows, and objects scattered on the floor gave it an eerie sense of abandonment that sent shivers down our spines. We slowly climbed the wooden stairs, which creaked with each step. The air felt thick, as if it was hard to breathe. There was no sound, everything was silent, but something in the atmosphere made us feel like we weren't alone. We reached the upstairs hallway, which looked just as abandoned as the first floor. Suddenly, I heard Charlie's trembling voice. "Did you see that?" Until then, I hadn't seen anything. But when I turned around, I saw a small shadow sliding down the hallway. It was too quick to be a mere trick of the light. We tried to follow it, and that's when everything started. The door at the end of the hallway, the one that, according to the stories, was supposed to be locked with a padlock, was open, and inside was a child's room. Everything inside looked old, but somehow it remained practically untouched. We entered, and suddenly the door slammed shut behind us. We tried to open it, but the door wouldn't budge, no matter how hard we turned the knob. Charlie turned on his phone's flashlight, and there, in the corner, we saw a boy standing. He was facing away from us, had short blonde hair, couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and was wearing a dirty white shirt and worn-out shorts that looked old-fashioned. He wasn't moving, didn't make a sound, but his presence was palpable, a mixture of sadness and something else, something dark. I heard Charlie whisper my name, but I couldn't react. I couldn't stop staring at the boy, who at that moment began to slowly turn around. We saw his face, pale, with a vacant stare. His cheeks were streaked with what looked like tear stains. I glanced at Charlie, but he was just as terrified as I was. I wanted to scream at him to get out of there, but something in my throat wouldn't let me speak. The boy raised an arm and pointed at us, looking at us in a chilling way. At that moment, the cold became unbearable. The phone's light started flickering, and suddenly the room was filled with whispers, which sounded like faint moans. The voice was childish, but we couldn't understand what it was saying. It was then that I felt a tug on my shirt. Charlie was frozen, staring at the boy, so I knew it wasn't him who had touched me. I reacted, trying to drag my friend toward the door, but as soon as I touched him, the room seemed to collapse around us. The boy disappeared, but his laughter, a distorted and sickening laugh, echoed throughout the house. Charlie snapped out of it, and we ran down the hallway, but the walls seemed to be moving, as if the house had come to life since we saw that boy. We rushed down the stairs as best we could, and when we finally made it outside, the cold night air hit our faces, and the door slammed shut behind us with a bang. Outside, our friends were staring at us in terror. They said we had been inside for over 2 hours, but to us, it had only felt like minutes. We never spoke to anyone about what we saw that night, but we both know that something of us stayed in that house. Charlie still avoids that street, and well, sometimes when I'm alone in my room and turn off the lights, I feel like someone is standing in the corner, watching me. I never dared to go near that house again. I've learned that sometimes, stories aren't just for children, and we should take them seriously before letting recklessness get the better of us.
Thank you for journeying with us through the dark passages of these stories. If you enjoyed them, give us a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of terror. Until next time, where fear will once again be your companion.